Lesson 3 Cultivating Intellectual Humility. As we learned in Lesson 2, everyone shares the same underlying building blocks of morality, but we all rely on them to different degrees, which results in our unique moral worldviews. We also discovered that although our perception of reality is subjective, we can feel convinced that our values and beliefs are the only right ones. We may even find ourselves thinking, why waste my time talking to someone who disagrees with me? I have nothing to learn from them. This tendency is natural, but over time, being overconfident in our beliefs and not exposing ourselves to diverse perspectives can harm us. How so? Being overconfident in our beliefs can result in blind spots that grow larger with time. Overconfidence can also damage relationships with others because we can seem stubborn or arrogant. In this lesson, Lesson 3 of the Perspectives course, you will learn research-backed methods to avoid these pitfalls. You'll learn techniques to improve your communication skills, explore mental magic tricks that can strengthen your decision-making, discover how to turn setbacks into opportunities. Let's start off with a simple question. How well do you understand how a zipper works? Slide the scale. You can't actually slide the scale, of course, but slide the scale to a appropriate location, right? Somewhere on the scale from very well to not at all, and then write that down on your Google Doc. Great. Now please write a detailed step-by-step explanation of how a zipper works. Go ahead and pause the video and do that. Okay, thanks for your answer. Let's see if anything has changed. Now, how well do you understand how a zipper works? Do you understand it more than so you initially did? Slide the scale to the appropriate location. Write that down. It looks like you kept your level of understanding the same. It looks like you had a more accurate understanding of how the zipper works. Most of us think we understand the world around us with a great depth and accuracy. However, most people know a lot less than they like to admit, including the most basic facts about the world around them. Research shows that people consistently overrate their understanding of simple concepts and mechanisms that we encounter every day. People overestimate their understanding of toilets, cell phones, airplanes, the internet. The list is endless. Only after people are asked to explain how these things work do they realize how shallow their understanding really is. So, most of the time, we're ignorant of our own ignorance. Why does this matter? You might be thinking, so what? Why do I need to know how a zipper works? Those things aren't important. That may be true, but the thing is, this type of overconfidence extends to things that really do matter. Let's take a look. From the list below, please select a topic that you support and care a lot about. Reducing government spending, universal health care, gun control regulation, defunding the police, abortion bans, building a border wall, climate change regulation, or tuition-free college. For the sake of argument, I randomly chose one. Great. In order to make progress, and of course write that down. In order to make progress towards, random example, defunding the police, many experts believe it would be necessary to create new government agencies to handle nonviolent crises previously addressed by the police. In a step-by-step manner, please explain how to implement a solution to one of these issues that you chose. Right? So again, select a topic that you support and care about, and now in a step-by-step manner, explain how to implement a solution or how best to handle these issues. So go ahead and pause the video and do that now. As a result, after doing this exercise, many people also report being less certain about their position on the issue. This phenomenon is known as the illusion of explanatory depth. Most of us have a powerful but inaccurate feeling of knowing the whole of something even when our understanding is limited. This is a natural part of the human condition. We all overestimate how much we know and the accuracy of our beliefs. What happens when we do realize that we were wrong? Many of us find it so unpleasant to realize what we're wrong that even when the cracks in our understanding begin to appear, we can struggle to admit it. Sometimes finding out we're wrong can make us feel like our whole worldview is being threatened. This is especially true if our error is tied to our core beliefs, our most deeply held convictions, which are intimately wrapped up with our sense of who we are. We all have a natural inclination to protect our beliefs and resist changing our minds. When our views come under attack, we often react defensively. In fact, research suggests our brains respond to attacks on our beliefs similarly to how would we respond to threats to our physical form. When we encounter arguments contrary to our views, our amygdala, the part of the brain that's evolved to leap into action at the sight of danger, gets activated. Basically, our brain treats evidence that goes against our beliefs much like it treats a predator. This all connects back to something we learned in Lesson 1. Our brains are prone to confirmation bias, the automatic tendency to interpret and seek out information in a way that confirms what we already believe. Confirmation bias reflects our deeply held instinct to minimize contact with ideas that our brain finds threatening. But it's not just our biology that predisposes us to cling to our beliefs and deny our mistakes. In many ways, our culture also instills in us an aversion to being wrong. We're often rewarded for presenting ourselves as the picture of perfection. For example, universities favor applicants with perfect GPAs, high standardized test scores, and admissions essays that highlight the applicant's achievements. Social media pressures us to curate the illusion of living a flawless, failure-free existence. All this makes it difficult to admit limitations and gaps in our knowledge. To review, which of the following describes how most people respond to the possibility that they're wrong? A. People tend to subtly seek out ways to avoid admitting they're wrong. Or B. People tend to willingly admit that they're wrong, period. Write one of these two sentences down on the doc. Exactly. Not only are we often wrong without realizing it, but the more people or information that challenges us, the more defensive we tend to get. We cling to our views and we end up even farther away from understanding and from personal growth. Is there another way? Yes, there is. We can develop intellectual humility, the willingness to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge and the possibility of being wrong. Preliminary research indicates that cultivating intellectual humility can improve our decision-making, relationships, and happiness. For example, compared to people who are unwilling to admit mistakes, people who are intellectually humble tend to be viewed as more attractive, more trustworthy, and more deserving of forgiveness. People also report higher levels of satisfaction in romantic relationships with a more humble partner. By embracing intellectual humility as a virtue, a positive character trait we can develop, we flip the traditional model of being wrong on its head. Tell me more. By embracing intellectual humility, you gain more control over how you feel about being wrong. If you fear admitting that you're wrong, you'll go to great lengths to avoid it. You won't expose yourself to new ideas and information, and when your views are challenged, you'll defend them at all costs. Your ego will get the best of you. But if you're intellectually humble, you never have to fear being wrong again, because you can recognize that being wrong isn't a bad thing. It's actually an opportunity for personal growth and development. Nearly 2,500 years ago, the Indian philosopher and religious leader Buddha said, "The fool who knows he is a fool is that much wiser. The fool who thinks he is wise is a fool indeed." In other words, the Buddha is saying that intellectual humility is a step on the road to wisdom. It makes you open to new experiences and new ideas, and such experiences and ideas can shake you free of error and ignorance. To review, which of the below is a better definition of intellectual humility? Write one of these down. Either A, the willingness to admit that you may be wrong about something, or B, not treating others badly even though we know we are intellectually superior to them. Go ahead and pause the video and write one of those down. Exactly. Like most goals worth working towards, becoming more intellectually humble is a gradual process, but you can get started quite easily. We're going to show you a few practical ways to begin. Let's start by focusing on how we communicate our ideas. Imagine you meet a person named Taylor who often speaks as though they're absolutely certain that what they're saying is true. They often use phrases like, "It's obvious that," "The only possibility is," "The fact is." How do you think people will perceive Taylor? Select any you think apply and write these down. People will think Taylor is very knowledgeable. People will think Taylor is arrogant. People will think Taylor is persuasive. Again, select any of these that you think apply. Many people expect that Taylor would be a persuasive speaker since they're 100% confident in the truth of everything they say. But researchers have found that people who speak with absolute confidence don't do themselves any favors. In fact, research shows people are unlikely to perceive Taylor as knowledgeable, despite their communicated certainty. Psychologist Julia Minson and colleagues found that people view those who demonstrate absolute confidence in their views as closed off to new information and other opinions. In contrast, people are more likely to view us as open if we speak with humility. How can I speak more humbly or with humility? Speaking with humility. Here are two techniques you can use. First, try speaking only for yourself. You can do this by using statements with the words I, me, and my. For example, I think that My impression is that, from my point of view, using these types of statements as opposed to saying everyone thinks that or it's true that acknowledges that you're sharing your perspective. You're not claiming your view is objectively correct. Second, try owning your uncertainty, meaning choose words and phrases that acknowledge the limits of your understanding. For example, you could try phrases like, maybe, it's possible that, from what I've read so far, and so on. Instead of claiming to have all the facts, you demonstrate that you're aware of the limits of your knowledge. You also indicate that you're open to changing your mind after learning from other people's perspectives. To review, which of these options is an example of speaking with humility? Write one of these down. In the future, humans will live on Mars. Or, I think it's possible that humans could eventually live on Mars. Correct. Starting a sentence with I think it's possible and using the word could shows that this speaker is presenting their best thinking about what might happen in the future, rather than claiming to know for a fact that it will happen. Let's move on to another skill we can use to increase our intellectual humility. Owning being wrong. As we've already learned, we tend to avoid admitting our errors because we think it can hurt our credibility. But researchers have found that people who admit mistakes often earn more trust and respect. For example, leaders who acknowledge their mistakes are deemed more likable and trustworthy by their employees. In contrast, leaders who try to preserve a facade of perfection have a harder time earning their employees' trust and building team camaraderie. The patterns of speech you just learned are ways you can demonstrate intellectual humility. Now let's talk about the inner work needed to truly embody it. For example, what if the next time you're proven wrong about something, rather than reacting defensively, you react by thinking, great, I just learned something new. I know more than I knew before. Poof, it's like magic. It resets the situation so that there's nothing to feel embarrassed or defensive about. That brings us to a mental magic trick that can help us boost your intellectual humility. It's a concept known as belief updating. Belief updating. Many of us think about beliefs in all or nothing terms. We tend to think that if you hold a belief, you must be 100% sure about it. It's either I believe this or I don't believe it. There's nothing in between. It's as if beliefs have an on or off switch. But if beliefs have an on-off switch, encountering new information creates dilemmas. You're left with two stark options. You can either flip the switch and reject your deeply held belief, or you can cling to your belief and reject the evidence. You probably feel trapped because both opinions feel bad. Is there another option? We can replace this binary approach with a more nuanced way of thinking. We can think of each of our beliefs as having its own dimmer switch, where we can turn our degree of certainty about each belief up or down. Why would that help? If each belief has a dimmer switch, we don't have to face the on-off dilemma anymore. Instead of being 100% committed to your beliefs, you can believe different things with different degrees of confidence. For example, you might be 40% confident about one belief and 70% confident about another, depending on your knowledge of each subject. Each time you encounter new information, it will either reinforce or contradict your beliefs. You can adjust the settings in your beliefs in either direction to take into account what you've just learned. If you encounter information that challenges one of your beliefs, you can update your confidence downwards, say from 70 to 60%. That's a much less drastic change than having to abandon the belief altogether. New information doesn't need to be perceived as a threat. Instead, it's an opportunity to fine-tune your convictions. Got it? Changing our minds. When you think about it, you've probably updated your beliefs before. You just may not have called it that. Can you think of something that you've changed your mind about? Here are some examples to get your memory flowing. You thought that a certain major would be good for you, but now you think you're better suited for something else. You held a negative view about someone, but now you see them in a completely different light. You used to hold a particular political opinion, but you revised your view. In one short phrase, describe one thing you used to think. Write this down on your doc. Pause the video if you need to. When we think about the opinions we held 5 years ago, we might feel embarrassed about our old beliefs. But there's no need to be ashamed about changing your mind if you learn something along the way. It's actually a sign of growth. We are all works in progress. Research shows that embracing growth can have a profound effect on our own lives. According to research by psychologist Carol Dweck out of Stanford, there are two mindsets that people tend to have about intelligence and ability. Before we explain them in detail, let's see which mindset you lean towards. Which of the following do you believe? Read each one carefully and check it off if you believe it. Leave it blank if you don't believe it. Write these down on your doc, at least the ones that you would check off. Trying new things is stressful for me, and I avoid it. If you're smart, you shouldn't have to try hard to do well. For some fields, like music or math, you either have natural ability or you don't. I appreciate when people give me feedback about my performance, even if it's negative. The harder you work at something, the better you will be at it. No matter what kind of person you are, you can always change substantially. Again, write down the ones you believe on your doc. Pause the video if you need to. Growth mindset. It seems like, on the whole, you currently hold, hopefully, what Dweck calls, hopefully not, it seems like on the whole, most of you currently hold what Dweck calls a fixed mindset. People who have a fixed mindset believe individuals are born with certain amounts of intelligence and ability, which are stable and unchangeable over time. By contrast, individuals with a growth mindset believe that intelligence and ability are changeable and can be developed over time through effort and persistence. Why does this matter? Understanding this is important because your mindset can impact your behavior and your ability to learn and succeed. Through her 30 years of research, Dweck has found that individuals with fixed and growth mindsets have different attitudes towards learning. Students with a fixed mindset focus on looking smart at all times and at all costs. Every choice they make is intended to avoid looking deficient in the eyes of others, so they often stay within their comfort zones. In contrast, students with a growth mindset take a different approach. They seek to learn at all times and at any costs. They constantly stretch themselves and take on new challenges so they can learn from their mistakes and improve. So how does this show up in real life? In a famous study, Dweck and her colleagues asked 4-year-olds to complete a jigsaw puzzle. The children could then choose to redo the same puzzle or try a harder one. Children with a fixed mindset chose to repeat the easier puzzle, knowing they would be successful. They articulated belief that smart kids don't make mistakes. On the other hand, those with a growth mindset were confused by the question. They didn't understand why anyone would want to repeat the easier task. They overwhelmingly opted for the harder puzzle. They chose to push themselves and learn something new. Interesting. Recent advances in neuroscience support the view held by those with a growth mindset. Our intelligence and ability truly can change over time. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain is constantly changing, even in adulthood, which is a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity. As we acquire new facts, skills, and perspectives, all of this learning is encoded in our brains. When we perform a new task or think about something in a novel way, we forge new neural connections. If we continue to repeat those tasks, our new pathways will get stronger and work faster over time. Though through our actions and habits, we literally rewire our brains, locking all of our growth into our neural circuitry. The more we internalize this, the more we shift from a fixed to a growth mindset. Does our mindset influence how we approach disagreements? Yes, it does. For many of us, when we enter a disagreement, it can feel as though we are warriors entering a battle. We have a point of view, and we're focused on proving we're right. Our goal is to defend our view and defeat our opponent. Disagreements become zero-sum. We believe one side has to win and the other side has to lose. When we enter disagreements in this way, we're not focused on listening. Instead, we're focused on winning. Sometimes, even when we realize the other person has a good point, we refuse to admit it out of fear of looking foolish or fallible. We essentially commit to not learning. Does this approach sound familiar? Yes, it sounds like the fixed mindset. Write that down. Exactly. Unfortunately, most of us approach disagreements with a fixed mindset where we are focused on looking right at all times. But imagine, we enter disagreements with intellectual humility and a growth mindset. There are some significant benefits. If you come prepared to admit that you might be wrong, you'll no longer feel compelled to prove your point. You'll be more open to listening and learning. The disagreement won't feel like a zero-sum battle. Instead, each disagreement becomes an opportunity for growth and learning. Finally, you won't need to think of the other person as an opponent. Instead, they can become your partner in exploration. Rather than attributing poor intentions to the other people, you can assume that they are sincere about their views, just like you are. How do I get started? Warrior mindset versus explorer mindset. Instead of approaching disagreements like a warrior charging into conflict, you can approach them like an explorer. Imagine that you're an explorer venturing through a place that you've never been to before, someone else's mind. If you're exploring someone else's worldview, you'd likely start by acknowledging how little you know. And because you don't know much, you will probably suspend your judgment and learn about why they believe what they do. When we approach disagreements this way, The person we are disagreeing with becomes the key to unlocking this mystery. With their help, you can start to understand why other people may see the world or a specific issue differently than you do. Let's review. Imagine that you meet Rahim and he disagrees with you on the issue that you selected earlier. The defunding the police one was just an example. Which of the following two responses would be approaching this disagreement like an explorer? I disagree, Rahim, but I'm curious. Could you explain why you think that? Or, I disagree, Rahim. The research on this is crystal clear. Right? The response that reflects the explorer mindset. Pause the video and do that now. Great job. The first one. By asking a question, you can learn more about why Rahim believes what he believes and hopefully grow your understanding of his position. If you find that you have elements of a fixed mindset or tend to approach disagreements like a warrior, don't worry. Just as abilities can be developed over time, we can gradually cultivate a growth mindset and learn to take an explorer approach to disagreements. How do I do that? Growing your mindset. There are 3 practical methods of injecting more growth into your mindset. Acknowledge that your abilities are fluid. View each mistake as a learning opportunity. Challenge yourself to do things you haven't already mastered. Let's start with how to acknowledge that your abilities are fluid. Just add this one simple word to your vocabulary. Yet. Yet means your knowledge isn't fixed. Yet means you're still able to change. It comes in handy all the time. For example, I don't speak French fluently yet. I haven't run a 5K yet. I haven't climbed a mountain yet. What's another way to practice a growth mindset? View each mistake as a learning opportunity. No one is perfect. We all struggle and make mistakes sometimes, but these mistakes can often lead to important learning opportunities. Think of a time when you learned something valuable from a mistake that you made. Here are some common types of mistakes to get your memory flowing. You didn't budget enough time for a task such as an assignment or a project like the bento box assignment and had to rush the job. You weren't paying attention while doing something, such as cooking, and it went wrong. Someone warned you about the dangers of something, such as not wearing sunscreen, but you ignored it and got hurt. In one short phrase, describe the mistake you made. Go ahead and pause the video and write that down in your doc. You now have a real personal example of growing after experiencing and acknowledging a mistake. Next time you make a mistake, try to consciously take note of what you can learn from it. You'll turn the mistake into a valuable learning opportunity that you can carry with you going forward. As the inventor Thomas Edison once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." What's another way to practice a growth mindset? Challenge yourself to do things you haven't already mastered. Dr. Dweck's research shows that the more you practice things you haven't already mastered, the more you'll grow. Rather than turning down opportunities that might seem daunting, lean into them. For example, if you have a fear of public speaking and you're offered a chance to speak in front of a crowd, challenge yourself to accept it. Each time you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, you will gain more mastery and your fear will start to dissipate. How do I put this into practice? Life hacks. Here are 4 simple life hacks to help you practice intellectual humility and to develop a growth mindset. Number 1, celebrate your mistakes. Over the next week, when you notice that you were wrong about something, take a moment to identify what you've learned from that mistake. Then, celebrate your growth. You can think to yourself, I now know more than I did before. Number 2, fine-tune your beliefs. Over the next week, make a point of imagining that each of your beliefs has a dimmer switch. When you encounter information that is relevant to one of your beliefs, think about how you can turn the dial on that belief to update your confidence level. Number 3, acknowledge that your abilities are fluid. Have you ever said, I can't do that? In the next 24 hours, use the word yet after describing yourself or your goals. For example, I can't play guitar yet. I can't do that yet. Number 4, approach disagreements like an explorer, not a warrior. The next time you get into a disagreement, instead of approaching it like a warrior entering a battle, try to approach it like an explorer trying to discover a new world. Get curious about the other person's view. Which life hack would you like to do? Write down the one that you would like to do. Go ahead and pause the video to do that. Great. We'll send you a reminder of the life hack you chose in a summary email. But before we wrap up, let's do some brief self-reflection. On your doc, What's the key takeaway you learned from this lesson? Pause the video and write that down. In the upcoming week, how will you implement this key takeaway in your life? Pause the video and describe how you will implement the key takeaway you learned from this lesson in your own life this week. Pause the video to do so. That's it for Lesson 3. In this lesson, we learned how we can approach disagreements like an explorer rather than a warrior. This shift in mindset means that we can view engaging with diverse perspectives as an exciting opportunity for growth. But maybe you're not convinced that it's really worth your time to talk to people who see things differently from you. It may still seem easier to stick with people who share the same values and beliefs as you. And it's okay to be skeptical. In Lesson 4, we learn more about the benefits of communicating across differences. We'll even address some concerns you might have about deciding when and how to engage with others. As a reminder, here's a summary of what you learned in Lesson 3. Most of us have a false impression that we know a lot more than we actually do, but in reality this is an illusion. We often go to great lengths to avoid being wrong. These tendencies can limit us in a variety of ways. We can choose a better path by cultivating intellectual humility, the willingness to acknowledge the limits of our own knowledge and the possibility of being wrong. With intellectual humility, we don't need to fear being wrong. Instead, we can view it as a benefit. We now know something we didn't know before. Becoming more intellectually humble is a gradual process, but we can begin by speaking with humility, choosing our words carefully to show that we're presenting our subjective perspective rather than stating irrefutable facts. Two specific techniques we can use are speaking for ourselves only, using I, me, and my statements, and owning our uncertainty, indicating that we're moderately certain that we're correct. Another trick we learned is called belief updating. Rather than thinking about our beliefs as having an on-off switch, we can think of each of our beliefs as having a dimmer switch. We can adjust our degree of certainty about each belief to reflect how certain we are. We don't need to think about our beliefs as being all or nothing. We can be more nuanced and adjust our degree of certainty over time. The theory of the growth mindset shows us why accepting our limits on knowledge can be quite good for us. Those with a fixed mindset believe that intelligence and ability are set in stone. This often causes them to prioritize looking smart at all costs, which makes it harder to learn and grow. But those with a growth mindset believe that intelligence and ability can develop. As a result, they often relish accepting new challenges, which makes it easier for them to learn and grow. We can apply these insights to how we behave in disagreements. Rather than approaching a disagreement like a warrior entering a battle, we can instead approach disagreements like an explorer discovering the unknown. We can adopt an explorer mindset. We can be curious, and we can seek to understand rather than to win. In order to inject more growth into your mindset, you can acknowledge that your abilities are fluid, viewing each mistake as a learning opportunity and challenging yourself to do things you haven't already mastered. This completes Lesson 3 of Perspectives.